Angola will, on the 24th of August, elect a new president. The election is reported to be a standoff between a ruling MPLA party in power for nearly 5 decades and the opposition UNITA party with growing appeal to a frustrated, impoverished youth. The MPLA, led by João Lourenço since 2017, has governed in its fifth multi-party election since 1992. Long-time opposition party UNITA is stronger, though, than ever, and as anger grows at government's failures to convert the vast oil wealth into better living conditions for all, Angola is Africa's second biggest oil producer in Africa, but half of the Angolans live in poverty, and more than half of those under 25 are unemployed. Half of the voters are under 35. Speaking at the MPLA party rally on Saturday, Lourenço said that his country is less corrupt since he took over 5 years ago.
There have been exactly 5 years since the moment we started this mandate that is ending now. We worked during this mandate to make Angola a new Angola, an Angola that is better accepted by the Angolans, but also by the international community. No one can take away from the party this old ambition to end something that shamed us, corruption, which was deeply rooted not only politically in the leadership, but also rooted in our society. We broke this taboo and really started the fight against corruption. Nobody in the world likes to bet on the worst party. Everyone likes to bet on the best. So vote for the MPLA. Vote 8. Thank you very much, people of Luanda.
A little earlier, I spoke to Dr. Justin Pearce, the senior lecturer at the Department of History at the University of Stellenbosch, for a preview of the upcoming Angolan elections. So they're saying that this election race is the tightest in the democratic era in Angola. Do you think that's the case?
It's certainly the case. I think what we've seen ever since the end of the civil war in Angola, which was in 2002, each of the subsequent elections, which is 2008, 2012, 2017, in each of those, the MPLA, the ruling party's share of the vote, has got progressively less. And, the polls that we have indicate that trend is continuing. So indeed, this does look to be a tightly contested race. The opposition is better organized than it's ever been before. And the government is still battling to keep the population on side in the midst of a deep and ongoing economic crisis.
So who are the main frontrunners? I guess the parties, it's UNITA and MPLA, which has been the story forever. Who are the faces of those two parties?
Well, the face of the MPLA, of course, is the current president, João Lourenço. He's been president for 5 years. When the former president, José Eduardo dos Santos, was finally retiring, he appointed Lourenço as his successor. When Lourenço came to power, he soon realized that the best thing for him to do to get some credibility was to distance himself from dos Santos. Because of this, he one of the first things he did was to take action against figures associated with dos Santos, who were suspected of corruption, notably dos Santos' daughter Isabel and son José Filomeno. By prosecuting them and sequestering their assets, I think Lourenço hoped that he would get the population on side. However, he was governing in the midst of a profound economic crisis, and soon the old problems of poverty and unemployment raised their heads once again. On the other side, you have the leader of UNITA, Adalberto da Costa Jr., who was elected party leader in 2019, representing a fresh face and a generational change for the party. I think UNITA over the last few years has taken great strides in moving away from its old traditional base, aligning itself with the calls for change which are coming from Angolan society, and particularly from the younger generation. And I think Adalberto da Costa Jr. has managed to include on his electoral list prominent figures associated with the opposition, but outside UNITA, so that UNITA is now going into this election presenting itself as a united opposition front.
All right. So President Lourenço, he talked about corruption in campaigning the last time. And as you said, he sort of went for some symbolic figures. He also talked about being the president for change from the past. Has he been able to do that to a sufficient degree to convince the voters to give him another 5 years, do you think?
I think he's been badly constrained by the economic situation. He really didn't have it in his power to undo the massive inequality that he inherited, particularly because he took power a few years after the crash in the oil price, which signaled the end of a long economic boom in Angola. Now, during that boom, of course, the very rich had got even richer. Things had stayed much the same for the poorest, so that Angola got more unequal. But there was a middle class that did all right out of the economic boom, got used to a comfortable lifestyle. I think what's happened now, the boom's come to an end. The MPLA can no longer rely on the support of the middle class, who are now struggling to make ends meet, while life has still not got any better for the poorest. There are deep structural inequalities, which I think, with the best will in the world, Lourenço would battle to do anything about.
I think you've already given us a clue about my next question, but what about UNITA? Are they still with the spirit of Jonas Savimbi, or, as you've said, there's a new generation, but is there a new feeling about UNITA?
I think UNITA has its old constituency who were there in the days of Savimbi and who will still support it. But I think particularly as a younger generation has come up through the electorate. For this election is happening 20 years after the end of the war. Now, for the first time, there are people voting who were not even born when the Civil War ended. So that, over the last few elections, those memories of the war have become less and less important. People have become more and more preoccupied with the needs of the here and now. I think UNITA, particularly in the last few years, has learnt to be responsive to those demands from society, to ally itself with civil society, and to, I think, gain the trust and the support of the youth protest movements who've been radically shifting the political agenda over the last 10 years or so. And yes, I think by those means, UNITA has managed to consolidate itself as a credible opposition force.
Can Angola deliver a free and fair election? There are concerns about the electoral list having dead people on it.
Well, yes, certainly there are concerns over dead people on the voters' roll. But beyond that, if we look back to the last election in 2017, as soon as the result was announced, the ruling party declared victory before even all the results had come in. The opposition parties got together and with civil society to make their objections known to the lack of transparency in the electoral process. The Electoral Commission is by no means impartial. It's dominated by government and ruling party appointees. And, I think nothing has changed since 2017 in terms of the way that the election is conducted. So I think there will be real concerns over transparency again, particularly as the MPLA finds itself under increasing pressure.
What about things like media freedom? One hears reports that this sometimes is a shrinking space where private TV and radio stations can be randomly shut down, and comparisons being made to other countries where the power of incumbency and the resources of the state are used to silence the opposition.
Yeah. I think that is a real concern. You know, the media space and the public sphere generally has become more open since Lourenço became president. You know, I think that's one thing he can take some credit for. However, you know, broadcasting in particular remains dominated by the state and by allies of the ruling party. Those independent radio stations that exist are fairly limited in their reach. And on the state television and radio, in the run-up to the election, each party is given this allocated political party broadcast time. It's a set equal amount for each party. So each of them gets that. But then outside of that allocated time, by far the majority of the news coverage is sort of geared towards trumpeting the achievements of the government, thus effectively endorsing the ruling party.
Angola, much like the rest of the continent, made up of a lot of young people. But Angola has also got a very big urban population living in crowded areas, I guess. Are the young people, because they would be the most disaffected, I'm guessing, interested in the election, and will they show up?
This, you know, there's been an upsurge of activism among young people in the last decade or so, and you know, I think some young activists who've allied themselves with political parties are doing their best to mobilize that constituency. You know, I'm not sure how effective they've been in getting all the younger people onto the electoral roll. That could prove to be an issue. But, you know, I do think that it's in Luanda, which is an extremely large city, and more particularly among the young people of Luanda, that politics is most dynamic. And as far as I can see, I think the political parties have done a reasonably good job at capturing that energy. And we'll just have to see how that translates into electoral results.
All right, let's end where we started. And this idea of a tight election, is there a real possibility that the MPLA's dominance will be taken away in this election? Because I do look around, particularly in the SADC region, and ruling parties find a way. Sometimes they use whatever means necessary to stay in power. Could there be a new order?
You know, I think it's definitely relevant looking around the SADC region where, you know, a number of countries, South Africa, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Namibia, in all of those countries, it's the Liberation Party that's still in power. So, you know, we don't really have a precedent to see, you know, what happens after the Liberation Party. I really cannot see the MPLA conceding defeat in this election. You know, whatever the actual hypothetical free and fair results of the election might be, as I said, there's a lack of transparency around the process, and I do fear that the results could be manipulated if they're not favorable to what the government would want to see.